From London West.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise today on behalf of my colleagues in the Ontario NDP caucus to join the debate on Bill 202, an act respecting participation in boycotts and other anti-Semitic actions. This is a bill co-sponsored by the member for Eglinton Lawrence and the member from Niagara West Glanbrook. Before I get into the substance of my remarks, I wanted to comment for a moment on process. For a bill on an issue that is so politically charged, that has such far-reaching implications, it is astonishing that these members have allowed so little time for public scrutiny and analysis. It is astonishing and frankly disrespectful of our democratic process. It undermines our ability as MPPs to hear from the people we represent before coming into this debate on issues on their behalf in the legislature. So Bill 202 received first reading on Tuesday, and here we are just 2 days later in second reading debate. The short title of this bill is the Standing Up Against Anti-Semitism in Ontario Act. At the outset, Speaker, I want to state strongly and unequivocally that New Democrats, that all MPPs in this House are united in our commitment to stand up against anti-Semitism. Regardless of where we sit and which party we are from, all MPPs agree that racism and anti-Semitism must be actively opposed and condemned in the strongest possible terms. Earlier this month, many of us participated in Yom HaShoah ceremonies in our communities. In my riding of London West, I make it a priority to attend Holocaust Remembrance Day services because I recognize the importance of remembering the 6 million Jews who were systematically murdered by Hitler and of honouring the survivors who are with us today. Marking the day each year makes sure that collectively we will never forget, that we will never allow such evil to happen again. Speaker, anti-Semitism is evil. Discrimination or hatred against a people on the basis of race or religion is evil. We have a duty as MPPs, as Ontarians, as Canadians, to protect all our citizens from the ugliness and the injury of racism and anti-Semitism. That is why we have implemented criminal code protections against hate speech, which the code defines as speech that promotes genocide on the basis of colour, race, religion, ethnic origin, or sexual orientation. It's why we have put in place human rights codes in Canada and across all Canadian provinces to protect citizens from discrimination on the basis of race, national or ethnic origin, religion, and many other prohibited grounds. It's why our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which for many Canadians defines who we are as a people, begins with a guarantee of freedom of conscience and religion as one of the 4 fundamental freedoms guaranteed to every citizen, along with freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and freedom of association. Enshrining these charter rights in the Constitution recognizes that balancing protection from discrimination with the exercise of these fundamental freedoms can be difficult. But it is precisely when speech becomes offensive, when it becomes repugnant, that the protections of the Charter are most needed. In the context of this legal framework of rights and protections that we are having this debate today on Bill 202. Although this bill deals with more than post-secondary campuses, I understand that its impetus is in the growth of BDS activism on campuses across Canada and the U.S. I want to be clear, Speaker, that as NDP critic for training colleges and universities, one of my highest priorities is to make sure that no student faces intimidation, bullying, bigotry, or other forms of discrimination at Ontario post-secondary institutions, that no student feels uncomfortable or targeted or alienated on campus. However, our caucus does not believe that this bill is the appropriate way to address the legitimate concerns that students, particularly Jewish students, have raised. The purpose of Bill 202 is to prohibit public bodies from contracting with any person or entity that supports or participates in the BDS movement, and to prohibit public pension funds and college and university foundations from investing in any entity that supports or participates in BDS. Contracts or investments with BDS participants or supporters are to be terminated. This raises the question of how contracts are defined. Contracts could mean a whole variety of things. Is an MOU for student union fee remission a contract? Is a signed offer of admission a contract? Can university students who support BDS be denied the ability to attend post-secondary? Bill 202 also prohibits all Ontario colleges and universities from supporting or participating in the BDS movement, with consequences for contravening this prohibition to be determined by regulation. It is possible that these consequences could include financial penalties, as in Kansas and Pennsylvania, where legislation is currently being debated to defund universities that participate in Israeli boycotts. However you define support and participation, there is no question that this prohibition and the threat of sanctions constitutes an attack on freedom of speech and association at post-secondary campuses across Ontario. Student unions that organize student referendums on BDS, regardless of the outcome of the vote, would be guilty of participating in the BDS movement. Effectively, this bill imposes a duty on colleges and universities to prevent such student referendums from taking place. It will make Ontario post-secondary institutions responsible for policing the political activities of their students and for silencing public debate on campus, lest the institution be found guilty of contravening the Act. I'm not sure that the institution can be held legally accountable for student activities. However, there is no question that knowledge of legal consequences being applied will have a chilling effect on freedom of expression and freedom of association. It will make students feel they no longer have the right to express their political views. It will also have a chilling effect on academic freedom, which is central to the very mission of the university, as faculty consciously or unconsciously begin to self-censor as they avoid undertaking research or engaging students in discussion on the BDS movement. Speaker, Ontario New Democrats do not believe that it is the role of the state to prescribe what topics are acceptable for public discourse and what topics are not. It is not the role of government to prohibit citizens from expressing their opinions and debating ideas. Whether we strongly oppose the BDS movement or whether we agree with it, it is our role as MPPs to stand up for individual rights, to defend the freedom of association and freedom of expression of all Ontarians. In the famous words of Voltaire, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." In explaining its opposition to both BDS as well as anti-BDS laws, the Jewish organization Americans for Peace Now, or APN, says, "We oppose boycott, divestment, sanctions efforts targeting Israel. We believe such efforts are misguided, misdirected, and counterproductive. However, APN believes that legislation that seeks to combat BDS by undermining academic freedoms and free speech is equally misguided, likely to be counterproductive, and almost certainly unconstitutional." Similarly, there is no question that Bill 202, if passed, would face an immediate constitutional challenge and would almost certainly be found to violate the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The ability to freely discuss, debate, and exchange ideas, even controversial ones, is critical to the functioning of a healthy and robust democracy. Actualizing the values contained in Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms means welcoming the broadest possible range of competing political perspectives into the public realm. It means allowing citizens the freedom to choose which policies and which nation-states to support and which to oppose. We have the legal tools already in place to deal with racism and anti-Semitism and intimidation on our post-secondary campuses. We have the criminal code and human rights legislation. Thanks to the advocacy of the NDP, we now have an anti-racism directorate. Let's use these tools to develop positive, constructive solutions to these legitimate problems, rather than seeking to punish those who exercise their democratic rights. The way to deal with complex, contentious issues is through debate, discussion and dialogue, not through the stifling of dissent. Speaker, New Democrats are standing up strongly against anti-Semitism, but we are also standing up to defend our values, our rights and our freedoms. I urge all members to vote against this bill. Thank you, Speaker.